Cockapoo generations. Did you know that the Cockapoo you end up with is largely determined by what generation they come from? It's true, and it's a result of the Cockapoo being a crossbreed, meaning it is the cross between two purebred dogs, in this case, the Poodle and Cocker Spaniel. Things like coat color and texture, their size, and even health are all determined in a big way by what generation they are from. With that in mind, we wanted to break down these Cockapoo generations even further and point out what you can expect from each one, as well as teach you how to properly figure this stuff out on your own. A crash course in genetics. Before we can get officially started, it's a good idea to fully understand how breeders and other dog owners will refer to a dog. The first big thing to understand here is the F, which stands for filial and stands before the generation name. It's short for filial hybrid and simply represents that this is a crossbreed. Next, we have the number. F1, for example, would mean that this is a first-generation Cockapoo. Finally, we have the B, which stands for backcrossed and is something commonly done for doodles. An F1B Cockapoo is the offspring of a first-generation Cockapoo and a 100% Poodle, and this is done to ensure that the dog has a better chance of inheriting the Poodle's hypoallergenic nature. This is about all you're going to see when you go to a breeder, and so if you can grasp those three components, you should have no problem identifying what kind of Cockapoo you're actually getting. F1 Cockapoo. An F1 Cockapoo is going to be pretty difficult to predict, but it also has some upsides that future generations won't have. This crossbreed is literally 50% Cocker Spaniel and 50% Poodle, so it will be hard to know what the dog's physical traits will be before it's born. For breeders, this can be a challenging thing to deal with, but for you, it means that you might be getting one of the healthiest dogs out there. The F1 Cockapoo has something called hybrid vigor, which basically means that it will not inherit any of the genetic drawbacks that the parents had as a result of all the new genes being passed on. This Cockapoo is most likely to live a life that doesn't deal with many serious illnesses, and for this reason alone, it's worth looking into this generation. It is not guaranteed or even all that likely that this generation will yield a hypoallergenic dog, and so if you need that trait, there are generations that are much more likely to benefit you than this one. F1B Cockapoo. Next up, we have a Cockapoo we briefly mentioned in the intro. The F1B Cockapoo is a backcross and has about 75% Poodle genetics to only about 25% Cocker Spaniel. This is also one of the most popular types of Cockapoos that you will find, because they are much easier to predict what they will look like. Since they have more Poodle genes, they are much more likely to have a Poodle's coat as well as their hypoallergenic nature, and the only downside there is that you will have to brush them a lot more frequently if they do have that signature Poodle coat. You also might find that the F1Bs take on more of a Poodle's personality too, with tons of energy and a passion for being active. This generation thankfully holds on to some of that hybrid vigor, but not nearly as much as the F1 does. While the number might read F1 here, this is technically a second-generation Cockapoo, and hybrid vigor decreases significantly with each coming generation. F1BB Cockapoo. If you take an F1B Cockapoo and backcross them again, you'll end up with about 87.5% Poodle and only 12.5% Cocker Spaniel. This is one of the most lopsided mixes that you can find, and you're basically guaranteed to end up with a Cockapoo that is mostly Poodle here. That's great if you want a dog with long legs, a lot of energy, and a hypoallergenic and curly coat, but there are some things to take note of too. For one, expect to take trips to the groomers a lot more than you're probably used to, as these dogs are going to need a lot of care to make up for the fact that they almost never shed. This means brushing them every day in order to prevent matting or tangles, and it also means that you should be getting them clipped and professionally groomed every 6 to 12 weeks. This is probably the best option out there for people that don't want to deal with pet hair everywhere, or if you have allergies, but it is also going to be one of the more demanding options you can get from a breeder. It's also a third generation technically, and so that hybrid vigor is mostly gone. F2 Cockapoo. The F2 Cockapoo occurs when you cross two F1 Cockapoos together. Since both F1 Cockapoos will have a breakdown of about 50% Poodle and 50% Cocker Spaniel, this is also going to keep that same 50-50 split. This is one of the rarest Cockapoos to track down, as breeders don't usually want anything to do with them. They have less hybrid vigor than the F1, but are even more unpredictable than that generation. For that reason, it's not all that likely that you find an F2 Cockapoo, as it can be extremely difficult to actually know what the resulting dogs will look like. F2B Cockapoo, where an F1 Cockapoo is crossed with an F1B Cockapoo, and as a result is only about 62.5% Poodle and 37.5% Cocker Spaniel. Some breeders may opt to breed two F1Bs, which would actually result in a 75% and 25% split in favor of more Poodle. This is technically a third-generation dog, and so the hybrid vigor that is left will be minimal protection at best, but you will most likely get the Poodle genetics with an F2B, which makes it a still popular generation for breeders to have. F2B Cockapoo. The F2B Cockapoo is about 81.25% Poodle and only 18.75% Cocker Spaniel, locking in many of those hypoallergenic traits that the Poodle provides. This dog is the most hypoallergenic and non-shedding of all the dogs listed so far, and essentially every dog in the litter will also have a curly coat. Since this is technically the fourth generation of offspring by now, most breeders will refer to an F2B Cockapoo as multi-generational instead, and you may have to ask more questions for them to reveal just exactly what their breeding history is. Again, this is a great pick for people that don't mind putting in some extra care when it comes to grooming, so that they don't have to deal with dog allergies or having to clean up fur off the ground. F3 Cockapoo. Once you get to the third generation of these dogs, it's more than likely a breeder will just call them multi-generational. These dogs can be impossible to predict at a glance because the needed information isn't there, but you can ask almost any reputable breeder for more specifics and they will gladly tell you. At this point, the hybrid vigor benefit is gone, and these generations might have to deal with their own genetic issues as a result. Multi-generational dogs can look quite different depending on what the mix is, and so it's hard to know exactly what you're getting until it's born. And that just about wraps things up here for our guide on Cockapoo generations. If you ever feel like things are getting tricky, just try and break down the numbers and letters so that you can make out as much information as possible, or just ask the breeder and they can help you out too. We really hope we were able to teach you something today, and if we did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like these.